citizens, we interrupt your normally scheduled programming to bring you an emergency broadcast. This broadcast has been developed to both entertain and educate you in preparedness and survival skills. Please stay tuned. Your very life may depend on it.
Welcome back to another episode of Zulu Alpha Survival Podcast. As always, this episode will be Boomer Doomer and gluten-free. I am one of the hosts here, Joe Prim, and alongside me for this episode, as always, is the man, the myth, the legend, Myles Francis. How we doing tonight, bud?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. Had a pretty good week at work. Getting pretty close to finding a house on the house hunt front. Just about a week and a half ago, I finished up competing at Static Monsters, which I've been talking about it in the last couple of shows. It's put on by Strongman Corporation. It is a max axle bar deadlift and max log lift. I took third place in men's super heavyweight. So those that are listening, that means that I am in fact a big, thick, chunky boy. That's okay. That just means I get to stay nice and warm in the winter. But it was a nice confidence booster with the knee injury last year. To be able to get back into a competition and to have a podium finish was pretty awesome as well, especially coming back from a major knee injury. I am going to be focusing on building my squat up really heavy the rest of the year. I'm going to focus on just the compound movement, squat, bench, and deadlift. I'm not sure what my next competition will be, so I'm going to just spend the rest of this year just building up more and more and more strength for the next year. For our Patreon viewers, it's kind of hard to see it with the blur, but there is the trophy right there. Men's super heavyweight. It's a pretty cool little Hulk trophy. And then I'll go ahead and I'll announce what's up?
I said wicked.
It is pretty wicked, man. It was a really fun comp. Adam Kloop is a very good friend of mine. He got to compete with me. He and I are working on some cool stuff for next year that we'll be announcing after the new year. But it's always fun to get to compete with your friends. A lot of the guys and gals from the gym competed. There are some really stupidly strong women out there. Like one of the women, her third deadlift attempt was my opening deadlift, which is pretty insane. So just goes to show you, it doesn't matter who you are, man, woman, black, white, gay, straight, we don't care. The barbell weighs what the barbell weighs. The plate weighs what the plate weighs. Apparently my printer is going off. Well, real quick, I'm going to announce my whiskey of the week. This is an early early birthday present. My birthday's in November. I have here just a little shooter of Wolfhound Irish whiskey. I've never had this before. I will be honest, most of my knowledge and education in whiskey comes from American whiskey and bourbon, as well as Scotch whiskeys. I'm taking some extra classes right now on Canadian whiskey. I'm really getting into that. So Irish, everyone knows Jameson. It's a very flowery, light whiskey. I had Tullamore Dew a couple of weeks ago. That's a staple favorite of mine. So let's see. We have a nice golden color. I hate these cheap plastic bottles. It smells very floral. That's very typical of a lot of Irish whiskeys. They tend to have floral scents. This almost smells like, I almost want to say maybe like a honeysuckle, goldenrod perhaps. And of course you can tell it's a rye. Let's have a sip. So right off the bat, I'm getting some butterscotch. Not a lot of caramel. Definitely vanilla on the finish, which is another hallmark that I'm learning with Irish whiskeys. Again, they have a very floral nose. They tend to have smooth vanilla finish. This is actually pretty decent for a sipping whiskey. I'm having this on ice. That's what most people have recommended for this. I think this would be great as a mixer for a cocktail, maybe with some soda. I might try that next time, but I give this probably, for me personally, with my limited experience in Irish whiskey, I don't like it as much as Tullamore Dew. I don't like it as much as a Redbreast, but it certainly is a step up from, say, a Jameson. So I would definitely highly recommend this to our listeners if you are whiskey drinkers.
What was the
So,
name of
Joe,
that
I'm
one
going to hand
again?
it over up a little. I already told all my nonsense. This is called Wolfhound, and of course, like the Irish Wolfhound. So, yeah, we'll hand the reins over to you for a few minutes. Let's hear about your week, how work's been going. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, Myles, it's been crazy busy week here as well. I guess they're always all busy weeks. It's a matter of trying to manage how you deal with all the things that you have going on, I suppose, more than anything. But I was off of work for yesterday and was home for one heck of a storm blew through on Friday. Cold front came through here. It's been getting to down to freezing the last couple of nights, but yesterday some hail came in, and unlike most decent sized hail that I've ever seen that came down um, straight down because of the weight of the hail, this hail came down like horizontally, and it beat the living crap out of our house. But worse than that, it completely ruined our vehicles. So I know on the scale in this world between 1 and 10 vehicles and vehicle damage, as long as nobody got hurt, is probably around a 1 or a 2. But it is rough right now to walk out there and look at these vehicles. My poor Pearl, my Montero is just devastated. So we'll see what happens when we bring them in to have the insurance company take a look at them and see what it's going to take to get them, if even possible, back to looking good. But that one hurt. You spend so much time and energy and effort, and we kind of invest ourselves so much into the vehicles that we drive that, boy, oh boy, that was a real kick in the sack to go out after that storm, and just devastating to me personally. I took it hard.
Joe, I sympathize with you there on that. I guess I should say I empathize. I've never had my car destroyed by hail, but I empathize with the pain there. On the one hand, you're very correct. You're okay. Your wife and children are okay. Your animals are okay. But on the other, a car is still a pretty significant expenditure. With the exception of buying a home, cars are probably the largest financial investments we make as adults. And then let's also talk about what that means to us as humans, especially as men. Jordan Peterson, of course, he pops up on TikTok and on Instagram all the time. There's a clip taken from an interview where he said, take your hands off my effing car, you creep. And it talks about how a car represents privacy and independence.
Yep.
And it really does.
Yep.
Right? Think about it. You turn 16, you get that old beat to shit Oldsmobile from your grandma. That's all these specific miles. Yeah, I know, right? But it's like your thing. Like I said, I'm grateful everyone's all right, but I can empathize. That's yet another crappy thing to pile on top of everything else, right?
Yeah, it's especially with that Montero. I love that thing, but it's a 2003, and I absolutely love that thing. It's probably my favorite vehicle that I've ever had. I've had it for just a couple of years now. It's easy to work on. I enjoy getting under the hood. I enjoy working on it and keeping it maintained and in working order. That's at some point we'll talk about overlanding or bugging out, and that's our vehicle right there. And I have it set up, and I'm working on it towards that direction of building it even more complete in that area. So, but when you get a vehicle that's that old, parts and the way insurance companies look at it is a little bit different than the way that I look at it. So we'll see what happens in that area. I'm hoping that we can get her all shined up and fixed up and polished back up as good as new and keep moving forward, because That's that's my, as you said, that's my part of my identity and my independence right there in that vehicle. So, but yeah, it came down good, Myles. I'm surprised that we didn't have any broken windows or anything. We had plastic bins out in the backyard that we keep the hay in and keep the chicken feed in, and they were destroyed. There were 3 and 4 inch holes knocked through those black and yellow plastic bins. It was pretty gnarly. It came down for a good, I would say, 10-15 minutes. So always, always amazing and humbling to experience something like that, watching out the window and see something happen and realize how small and insignificant you really are and how little control you actually have of the world that we live in. And a constant reminder to control what we can control and kind of let what happens and trust that there is a plan and design behind the things that we don't control. Otherwise, you will be frustrated your entire life. So a good reminder, a good way of looking at things, but boy, oh boy, did that that one hurts. It still hurts that I did a little drive around with my son. We had to go to Home Depot and pick up a couple things. And the whole time you're driving, you're looking out over that hood, and that hood is all just pock-marked up. And it was ugly, Myles. It is ugly. So I'll take some pictures here soon and post them on Instagram to show you guys how gnarly it is. And said, I can't do much more, Myles, but just shake my head and smile about it, because it is what it is, and we'll move forward and cope with what we got to cope with. But boy, oh boy, did that one sting.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes you got to just take that L, and the upside, right? Depending on how bad the damage is, if you were looking to do some custom work on that hood, like put like a snorkel for the air intake on that, or maybe you wanted a custom roof rack or something, I mean, that shit's all got to go now. So, I mean, silver lining, brother.
We will see, won't we? We will see.
We will see. Oh, go ahead, Joe.
And congrats on that third place finish on Static Monster, dude. That is awesome. That is commendable. That is a lot of hard work and effort and coming to fruition. So congratulations on that, man. And I think also already having planned out what your goals are and what you're doing the rest of the year is huge, because so often you kind of get to a goal, you work so hard, you put in so much effort, and then you get there and you have that day, and whether you have great success on that day or don't meet your expectations on that day, that following day you're like, okay, now where am I? And I see a lot of people kind of spiral into a rough area after even a huge success. So good for you, man. Glad to hear that you got the rest of your year planned out in that and are moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's a good point you just brought up there, and it's, strength training has become such a big part of my life. I took a week off from the gym. It was I'm sure there's a power lifter or a strongman or Olympic lifter, somebody listening that can relate to this. The amount of adrenaline that your body releases on competition day to just nail those lifts, and the amount of effort, especially on these big compound full body lifts, you're spent. I mean, we went to like a burger bar grill afterwards. I killed like a whole order of mozzarella sticks, a double order of fries. I had a burger, and I asked for an extra patty on the side. We were just spent. So I took about a week off to just kind of like recover the body. I got a little bit of physio and massage work done. But after like day 4 or day 5, I was like, I know I need to take some time off, but this sucks. I want to get back under a barbell. So I'm already back in the gym now. I just spent the last week just kind of feeling out my deadlift, my squat, my bench press, to see where they were, to kind of look at next year. One of the competitions I'm looking at doing has a deadlift for reps event and a natural log bench press. So if I stick with just the compound lifts for now, it will carry over. And then if I decide to jump into that, I can have my coach Maria adjust some things and make it more specific as we get closer. But yeah, you got to have a plan to get back into action. Otherwise, you're going to just, hey, yay, good for me, podium finish. And then you just plummet down and get sedentary. And that's not a
No, and once you get comfortable there, trying to get back out of it's not easy. And that's kind of the direction that we're going in this episode, actually, is mental health episode. I think last month was like mental health month or something. I don't put a lot of stock into that, Myles, all these, months and stuff. In fact, it was, I think, a couple of years ago, my daughter came up to me and she said, "Dad, you know what?" I said, "No, what?" She said, "Dad, you know what?" I said, "What?" She said, "They have days for everything, Dad." I was like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "They have days for everything." It's like, what do you mean?" "Dad, tomorrow is National Pencil Day. They have days for everything." So it was hilarious that she noticed this trend of having a day or a week for everything under the sun. And we've even done a little Googling after she made the statement that they have a day for everything. And sure enough, pretty much anything that we could come up with to check out on Google, they have a national day for someplace along the calendar year. So having mental health month, I think we need to have mental health all year round. I think it's clever, and it's probably a nice thing to put some focus on that area, because it's an area where a lot of people need to get their mind to, but only spending, an obligation of spending a month or spending a few days here and there in corporations addressing this problem, I don't think is nearly enough to do what we need to do to bring it to where we need to bring it in the forefront, especially amongst us as men who seem to have a real problem these days. And I think for me, as we get into this conversation, it's going to really come down to, I think, for me, in my opinion, and what I've seen and what I've experienced, the people around you. What do you think, Myles?
Well, I do think it's kind of funny that we're talking about mental health, and we, as you just stated, missed Mental Health Month. So maybe you and I need to get evaluated for ADHD, because apparently we procrastinated too much on this episode. Yeah, and I agree. It needs to be not just a month. I think it's a nice gesture, but when we live in a world when 22 veterans a day are committing suicide, record numbers of first responders, doctors, doctors and cops and fire and EMS are committing suicide. People are quitting jobs over mental health concerns, leaving career fields that they've taken over a decade or more of pouring their time and their effort into because they get so burned out. It's a pretty serious issue. As far as the days for everything, I will say one thing I will agree with your daughter. Sometimes it's important. Okay. So as a powerlifter, I do know that every Monday is International Chest Day. And of course, every Tuesday is Taco Tuesday. But those are the only two that I celebrate. Granted, I celebrate each of them 52 times a year, but it does get a little out of control. So yeah, there's a lot we can discuss with this as we kind of tease it apart tonight. And, we can talk a little bit about, as you said, resources and those around you. We can also talk a lot about consistency. That's always been my strategy. I'm not going to get too much into my story. If you guys really want to hear what I have been through recently, I had a very vulnerable episode with Joe on Heroes Wanted, if you want to go back and listen to that. But it just goes to show you, it doesn't matter who you are, how much of a Billy badass you may be, how cool your job is, how strong you are, how much of a leader you are. I'm not trying to be an ass. I'm being humble and saying all those things. It can still bite you in the ass too.
Well, and I think those things are to your detriment, actually, if we're honest about it, and make you more vulnerable and put you in a position where it is more difficult to get back out of it, because it is such a shock to the system, and it is so different from what you ever expected or what you were planning on happening in your life. And I think that is why it hits some of the people that you don't expect it to hit in ways that are surprising from the outside, is because you see people that seem like they have things in order in their lives, that they have things pretty shored up, that they're confident in themselves, that they know where they're going, that they're very good, a lot of times very accomplished at what they do for a living, take a lot of pride in that, take a lot of pride in who they are as a leader in their home and who they are as a leader in their community. And a lot of times, I would say more often than we want to admit, those are the people that get hit hardest and end up being the most vulnerable to deep depression and to suicide, because it is something that they don't dabble in and that they don't have experience in, and they don't know how to act or react or how to take care of themselves. And I think on the other end there too, because I think when we really, if we're honest with ourselves, when we look at mental health, there's two aspects of it. There's you, and then there's the core group of people that are around you. And I don't think that you can solve the problem of you without having some people around you. And I think those people that seem so solid and so strong and seem like they have it together either don't have that group around them because they haven't needed that group around them, or don't know how to reach out to that group around them because maybe they've always kind of been the rock of that group. They're the one that everybody else kind of came to. They're the one that people could lean on. And when you go from being in that position where everybody leans on you and you're the strength and support of a family or your coworkers or your tribe of friends, and then you go to that place of weakness, it's very, very shaky ground and a very difficult transition. And a lot of times it happens faster than we want to realize.
Yeah, it's what you just said is something that I never really thought about in my head. I've always kind of been that person, and I think you have too, Joe. I've always been that person where somebody calls me and says, I'm having a weak moment. Can you come over and sit with me? Hey, I had a really rough call. I had a bad cardiac arrest. We had a bad car wreck. We had a shooting. Can I talk to you about it? And when you are that person that empathizes with people and talks to people and encourages people, and you're the one that needs that, it's number one, very difficult to take that hat off and go, holy shit, I need to take a step back and I need some help. Especially when you couple it with a very chaotic series of events. I talked about it in your last podcast. One of the most painful things for me to deal with through this last year, I had a major knee injury. I blew out my left knee. I tore my meniscus and I blew my MCL and ACL. And, as a strength athlete, number one, that impacted I couldn't compete for much of last year. I haven't competed since May of 2021. And this last October was my first competition in 18 months. So athletically, that injury messed me up. But the other side of that, too, is so much of my life revolves around that. My sleep hygiene revolves around that. My nutrition revolves around that. My recovery and self-care revolves around that. So when my outlet is gone or severely limited, I couldn't lift for almost 2 months. That was a very difficult thing to deal with, because when the world is falling apart around you and that one thing that you were clinging on to kind of give you some like an anchor in the storm, so to speak, right? Now I'm not waking up on time. I don't have to be at the gym at 6 o'clock before I go to work. Who cares? I'll stay up until 2 a.m. watching Netflix and eating gummy bears. Now, I'm not getting a massage every 2 months or every 2 weeks because I'm not lifting as heavy. Well, the other side of massage is there's a lot of that fascial release and a lot of that emotional release that comes from that. There is a significant impact in body work. Well, now I don't have to worry about making weight, so who cares if I eat a pizza tonight? So it's very easy to just completely fall off that bandwagon and spiral and spiral and spiral. And if you don't have good people around you, you're going to have a hard time coming back.
Well, and like you were saying there in your real life example, Myles, is you're also losing out on your camaraderie, your time with your people that are in your tribe where they meet on a daily basis. And I think that also plays a tremendous role in where do you seek out that help, then where do you find that help, where can you have those people that you can be vulnerable to, but at the same time know that you're protected in that vulnerability. We as men err towards being very protective of ourselves, and a lot of times we are maligned for how protective we are of ourselves, our reputation, our who we are. And it is important that we are that way. And I will reiterate that it is important that we are protective of ourselves, of our families, of our reputation. It is important. And that's why it is so important that we have those people that we can be vulnerable to, but vulnerable because there's trust there that has already been built. For me in my bouts with depression, and it's something that really has taken a toll on my family. And it's something that has taken its toll on so many people that I know personally, that I'm grateful that my bouts have been very, very short. They've been during difficult times. But for me, I've always envisioned it. And I remember having this conversation with you, Myles, of walking through an abyss and that depression where there were times where I could physically feel it pulling at my ankles, trying to pull me deeper and deeper down. And as you use the perfect word for struggling to have something to grab a hold of, you have to have something to grab a hold of to help fight against that depression or those mental problems, battles pulling against you the other way. And the more people that you can have grabbing onto your arms and trying to pull you out of this abyss of this fog and darkness and that the swamp that you're trying to wade through of your life at that moment, the more things that you can cling to that help support you where you're at, the better off that you will be in the end. But it is going to be a struggle. And I think that that's okay and needs to also be looked at is the idea that it is okay to have that struggle. It is okay to face that struggle. And it is okay to have to battle to get out of that. But that's not the end. That is not what defines you. That is not the end of the story, and shouldn't be the end of the story. In fact, it can be the beginning of something completely new and something completely different and something way better. But trying to see that is so difficult when you're in the midst of it, and having others around you to keep reminding you of that and to be there to support you and help bring you through is imperative.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. You need to, number one, you need to know who that tribe is.
Yeah.
So for me at the time, that was, and still very much is, we're all still very much in close contact. So my tribe at All Athletes Welcome in Prescott. So one of our trainers, Andy Dwyer. No, it's not actually Andy Dwyer, but he's a bit of a philosopher. He and I often talked religion and politics. my coach Maria were very close friends. It was really cool. She actually came down to my competition. And so many other awesome people like Colton and Kate and Katie, the hippie yoga girl. Hey, Katie, how are you doing? And just so many other wonderful friends that they see you, they train with you, they build you up, they encourage you. We learn from each other. We give each other chips. Colton says, "Hey, Myles, I need a spot over here," and "Hey, sure, you'll help me out with my bench press when you're done with your squat or whatever." And it starts as something stupid like that, and then you start competing together, and you start like going out to eat after the gym, and you start like talking outside of the gym, and you develop this really cool network of friends. And of course, I have lots of work friends, Michael and Holly, and so many other people. Mark Radis, so many people too many people to mention that really were there and helped walk with me through all that. You say that it's okay to walk through that abyss. One thing I do want to caution us all about: there's a very fine balance here. You're absolutely correct, Joe. We do need to be protective of ourselves as men to a point. I know that I am very guilty of very deeply introverting and withdrawing when things were starting to get heavy. And you know this, right? At the beginning of my divorce, I don't think I talked to you or anybody for 3, 4, 5 months. So, it just happens. So, if you are that person that people are relying on, it's okay to reach out and find somebody else for a short period of time. But the key there is, you're right. It doesn't have to be the end. I look at where I was a year ago. I look at where I am today. I'm getting close to purchasing a home. I am well established in a completely different career path. I've walked away from paramedicine in the field, and I now work for a pharmaceuticals company that pays me a ton of money and treats me really well, has great benefits, nice people to work with. I'm back to competing. My strength has come roaring back. Squat's still not where it was, but it's a huge. I hit 315 pounds, which for me is not a very heavy squat. But when I consider that I have stayed below 300 pounds for nearly a year rehabbing this knee, that shows you that even in the midst of absolute hellfire, if you're surrounded by quality people and you make quality choices and you do the work, go to therapy, you stay healthy, you make healthy choices, commit to something, have a goal, because that was really what did it. Was between therapy and getting back into faith. And again, we talked really in depth about that on your Heroes Welcome episode, where I came back out of the dust, so to speak. Was it out of the ashes, we said at the end of that episode? But the other thing was getting into physical therapy. And my physical therapist hated me because I was like, I want to deadlift, I want to squat. And they're like, you blew your knee up, you can't do any of that. How about leg press? I'm like, I hate leg press, so I'm pushing heavier and heavier than I should. And probably may have actually slowed down my recovery a little bit, but it was nice to actually have something physical to cling on to. And then as that swelling went down and those tendons started regrowing, and I got some newer, more experimental therapies that were non-surgical, and able to get back into the gym and reunite with that circle of friends and restart that consistent way of living. And it's important, because I think that's a lesson. And I know that you can say the same thing, Joe, because we've had a lot of these very vulnerable conversations where you just get to a point and you're like, I can't just stay in bed for 9 hours.
Yeah.
It happens. We have those moments of weakness. But you get to that point and you go, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't just lay in bed all day. I can't just get up just to poop and eat and take the dog out, right? I need to actually do something. And sometimes all it takes is that first step of course, identifying that there's an issue, whether it's depression or anxiety or whatever is going on. Identifying that there's an issue, making an action plan, taking it a step at a time, And it's funny because as a personal trainer, as a nutritionist, and I know you can echo this as a life coach, what do we tell our clients all the time? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a first step.
Yeah.
I don't bombard a nutrition client day one with macro and micronutrients. I spend a couple of weeks in habit development, basic education on nutrition, teaching them how to set goals. And then we forget to do that ourselves.
Yeah. I think this goes back to, and this is all about what preparedness is, and really what we talked about and kind of set down for a foundation in the first episode of Zulu Alpha. And this is not preparedness for the end of the world as everybody knows it, but this is being prepared for the end of the world as you know it. And this idea of having friends and people that you can lean on begins today. When you are mentally healthy, hopefully, that's when this begins, because nobody that's going through mental health issues, nobody that's contemplating suicide, nobody that is in the midst of depression thought that this is where we're going to be 6 months ago, 12 months ago, or 18 months ago. This stuff comes upon us. Something gets it started, whether it's work or relationships or whatever it might be in your life. Something spurs you into a certain direction. Maybe this is something that is a part of what you inherited from somebody else in your family, that you are more susceptible to depression and the issues of depression or mental health, right? But the problem is that if you do not engage and start to build that brotherhood, those relationships, those friendships that are deeper than just surface deep before you get there, it is next to impossible to build those relationships when you get there. And a big part of the reason why I bring up the balancing act between being protective and being vulnerable is because as a coach, I see far too many men on Facebook reaching out for help from strangers. And these are good, wholesome, strong men who are reaching out to people that don't know them from Adam for help when they're in dark areas in their life. And rather than have anybody in their life, a mentor, a coach, a parent, a pastor, I don't, at this point, to be honest with you, don't care who it is that you reach out to. It will be better than reaching out to a bunch of anonymous people in a men's Facebook group. I would encourage you not to do that. Don't reach out to the whole group. Pick an individual. If there's an individual in that group or 2 or 3 individuals in that group, private message them and ask for help. And maybe you won't get any response, but maybe you will. But at the very least, you will have somebody, hopefully, that will listen to you. You need people that are invested in who you are and invested in where you are going, not just random strangers. Because what I see is you are going to, in a very vulnerable spot, you're asking for help and you're looking for some guidance and direction. And some people are going to answer you one way and some people are going to answer you the other way. All this will do for you is add to the confusion. And if anything is going to happen, you are going to follow after those that have confirmed your bias. If it's an issue at work, you're going to go down the path and listen to everybody else who says, yep, it's your boss's fault. Your boss is a jerk. You need to do this. Because that's already what you've been thinking, when in reality, maybe that's not the best choice. Maybe if you had your father or your uncle or your grandfather or your neighbor knows you and knows your patterns and would correctly guide you into the different direction. But since you're more comfortable and they confirm your bias, you're going to buy into it. And now you're going to justify it because 10 or 15 or 20 other men told you and agreed with you that this is what you need to do, when it could be the complete opposite. But they have nothing invested into you. They have no care about you beyond that paragraph that they wrote. And where you go tomorrow, where you go the next day, where you end up 5 hours from them means nothing to them. And that's why I'm so cautious and remind you that, yes, we cannot, or we need to be vulnerable, but at the same time, we cannot just be vulnerable to be vulnerable. There's a reason that we as men have inherited this idea of being protective of ourselves and our families and our relationships and our emotions. It's a good thing. Can we err in the wrong way? Yeah, just like you can err in the wrong way with vulnerability. But that's my biggest reason, Myles, that I caution people and want to encourage people. Now is the time to build those relationships. And now is the time to reach out. Now is the time to start talking to people. And especially, just like you, Myles, I am an introvert. I can curl up in a box and just stay home and be completely content to just mind my own business and do my own thing. But I know that is only going to hurt me in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. A lot of the things that I was talking about in this last bit of my segment here were, what can you as an individual do when those walls are closing in on you, when you're in that acute moment? And that's important to remember, men and women that are listening. That's an important thing to remember. But as I've said how many times on this show already, the lone wolf mindset is bullshit.
Yep.
How many times have I talked on your various podcasts or on shows on Prepper Broadcasting Network where I preach the concept of the mutual assistance group?
Yep.
So, guys, your mutual assistance group, your quote unquote prepper group, go nuts. Go to the range, have fun, do group buys on supplies, But it's got to be more than that. If the people in your survival group that you're going to be leaning on in really dark times aren't people that you can lean on today, yeah, we're talking about like your world falls apart. God forbid the actual world falls apart. If you can't lean on your group now, how well do you think that's going to go later on when the balloon goes up, right? So building those friendships now, building those relationships now, being selectively vulnerable. That's the terminology I'm going to use, Joe, is selective vulnerability, where we know it's a person who's not going to take advantage of that vulnerability, where we know that it is a person who truly cares about us and we care about them, and a person who is actually truly there to look out for you. Build that relationship now. Don't wait for that relationship when you're in crisis or when the world is falling apart around you, literally or figuratively.
And at the same time, if you are right now in a position of darkness where you feel you're in the midst of that abyss, you're walking through the fog, you're walking through this swamp in the dark with these ideas and doubts and questions and depression pulling down at you, trying to drown you, reach out to people that you have relationships with. They might not be to the point where you think that person would drive across the country to come see you or would give you an hour or 2 hours of your day. But the reason that this idea came to my mind actually had nothing to do with Mental Health Month and everything to do with the other day flipping through YouTube with my son and daughters. We often just watch trailers for movies coming up or something from Babylon Bee. And there on my suggested videos was a video of a friend of mine who was a guest on Ever Vigilant, my original podcast, several times. And as he popped up, I mentioned to my kids that he had committed suicide a couple years ago. And when I found out about that, I'll be honest with you, it rocked my world. It really did. And I told my wife that if I had even had just a little bit of an idea of what was going on in his life, if he had just sent me a text message or a phone call, or if I had been able to just understand a little bit of what was going on in his life, I would have dropped everything and drove out to see him and done anything that I could possibly have done at that moment to help support him. And I remember I told my wife that as I was pretty crushed, and she said, I didn't really think that you felt that way about anybody in your life, Joe. And that was both a kick in the balls and a confirmation of the fact that I do care about people tremendously. And that one hurt that happened. A good man. We had a lot of conversations, a lot of really, really good conversations. And to try to wrap my mind around the fact that, again, somebody like I described in the beginning of this segment here, where it seemed like they had it together, strong, good father, good husband, great set of values, smart guy, and to hear what happened and not have had an opportunity to do something there. Reach out to somebody, reach out to people that you have some sort of relationship with. I know I just spoke and said not to reach out to strangers. Never reach out to strangers. Reach out to people that you know, even if it's you've had minimal conversation with that person, somebody that you shake their hand every Sunday in church, your pastor, a coworker that you've had a beer with a couple of times after work, your boss, a coach, somebody. Reach out and let them know where you are so that they can do what they can to help pull you out of where you're at.
Pastors are a great resource in times of crisis for a lot of reasons. Obviously, spiritual guidance and encouragement, but you just kind of mentioned, hey, the guy that you shake hands with at church. You may come to your pastor with an issue, and he might say, you know who would be a great mentor for you right now, or a great friend for you right now? Let's go talk to so-and-so. Somebody that you may not even realize has been there for you or could be there for you would be a good option. So I'm terribly sorry to hear that, Joe. I have so many similar experiences myself, unfortunately. In my line of work, it's just... And that's why, number one, we got to take care of ourselves, but we also got to be plugged in with people. And when you find that tribe, if you really give a shit about somebody, don't be afraid to ask them those hard questions. Yeah. Hey, man, thanks for coming over for dinner, but you're really quiet. Everything going okay at home? Doing all right at work? You feeling okay? Sometimes, especially, and I bet you would echo this, Joe. If you are that introvert, if you are that I'm going to sink into the desert wilderness kind of guy, a true friend asking you that might be enough to slap you in the face and go, oh, crap. What do we got to do to fix this?
Well, and sometimes it's as simple as giving somebody a phone call when they didn't show up on the Wednesday night that you usually meet or hang out, or you haven't seen their show up on Sunday mornings for church or something like that, to give a phone call. And because sometimes when you're in the midst of that, you just need to know that you were missed, that somebody recognized that maybe you showed, even though you showed up, you weren't there, but maybe you didn't even show up. Hey, I noticed that. I saw that you weren't here. What's up? What can you want to go grab a beer or grab a coffee later this week? What's on your mind? And I think too, as you and I grow older, I believe that it's historically more and more our responsibility to take younger men under our wing. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we have some sort of official position with them. But I think that it is important that as we mature and have experienced more of life, that we ask for those phone numbers and shoot out an encouraging phone message during the week, or, ask those questions if people don't show up, to just remind people that, hey, there's people out there praying for you. There's people out there thinking about you, so that you are there to provide that shoulder or that person to lean on when they get to that point, because everybody's going to get to that point at some time in their life.
Absolutely, Joe. Well, I think that's about as much as I can take of a topic this heavy for tonight. How are you feeling about it?
No, I'm with you there. We as hard as we try and want to keep this a lighthearted podcast, just because that's who Myles and I are. The reality is, it was funny. This just kind of came to my mind, like I said, and I shot out a text to Myles about, hey, maybe we should do a podcast on mental health. And it didn't take but a minute for Myles to get back and say, yeah, I think that's something that we need to do. So,
it seems to me, it really fit the mission of this podcast. And that is, being boomer and gluten-free and all that good shit. We talk mindset, and part of that is, let's, have a healthy meal and go to the gym and raw and practice and train. But the other part of that is recognizing when something's broken, when to ask for help, or when to check on your buddies.
Exactly. Build that brotherhood, build those friendships, build those relationships now. Now is the time. That's one of my biggest things that I've had to learn and had to battle through and fight through, is learning how to build friendships and relationships as an introvert. And go out there and do the same. Get out of your comfort zone. Go talk to people. Go introduce yourself to people. Invite people out. Grab a coffee. Grab a meal. Invite people over to your house, especially to break bread and get to know them that way, and encourage people. It's funny, right now, I have a small group of guys here in the Austin area, all transplants. All of us have kind of given up our network in construction where we lived before, are in Austin, and all these guys are younger than me. And it has been my mission to pass out their resumes and to encourage them and help push them towards what their goals are and where they want to go. Give them advice, give them information, try to introduce them to new people and different people. And I don't know what that impact will ever be, if it'll ever seem like it's much. But these are the types of things that I'm talking about when I'm saying, as an introvert, you have to get out of your comfort zone and start to build those relationships and build rapport with everyone else. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters. It was not that long ago, I was reading something about, going to church or these things that we live in such a world of everything focused on ourselves. We live in a very self-centric society, in a very self-centric period of time in this world. And you've got to get over that. You've got to push past that and realize that, just as it says in the Bible over and over and over again, it's not about you, stupid. It's about everybody else. And whether that means going to church because your wife and kids need to go to church, then go to church because your wife and kids and everybody else sitting in the pews around you need you there. If it means going here or there, or making this group, or inviting people out, and even if you're the one who always invites people out, Myles, I remember being that guy and getting eventually just getting so tired of being the one that always had to invite everybody else out. I would just kind of let things crumble and fall apart. Well, you know what? Be that glue and be proud of yourself as being that glue that's holding everything together. Don't stray from it. Don't hide from it. Just be that, because it's not about you. It is about everybody else.
Well, Joe, I think that sums it all up pretty dang good right there, man.
As always, thanks for listening to this podcast. This podcast is only going to grow with your help. So please subscribe, please leave reviews, and please share this podcast with people around you that want to listen to an awesome podcast.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Interact with us. Reach out to us on social media. Comment on the Instagram posts about the podcasts. Reviews go a long way. Recommendations go a long way. We're really just two bearded dudes drinking beer, or in my case, whiskey, and having a good time once a week. So we're happy to have you guys join us. We'd love to be more interactive with you as we continue to grow. We got some great topics coming up. I think next week's episode is going to be on, what are we going to call it? Should I stay or should I go?
Yeah.
It's going to be on bug out versus bug in. We got an episode coming up for my birthday. It's a surprise. It's a little bit of a lighthearted, silly episode because we've been hitting such heavy topics. We're going to do something fun. And then we got another one coming up that we're going to talk about. It's going to kind of come full circle to a lot of these things we've been touching on, a little bit of networking, a little bit of communication skills. We're going to talk mainly in that episode about how to do an area study and really get to know the area around you, where are your logistical strong points, your threat assessments, etc. So we got a lot of exciting content coming up and some really cool stuff we're excited to announce after the new year, but that can't happen without your guys' support. So please, guys, like, share, follow, whole 9 yards. You can reach out to us. You can find me on Instagram at _snake doctor, or my business page at Archangel Dynamics LLC. And Joe, where can we find you?
You can find me. You can find the podcast on Instagram at Zulu Alpha _actual, and you can find myself on Instagram at Prepare.Defend.Lead. With that, we're signing out.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for listening. Oh, well, that was fun.